Okay, so we're going to continue on with Maisie Yates, the hero of Hope Springs, and we're starting at page 327. Every morning, Sammy woke up with a panicked feeling rattling around in her chest, and every morning it took her a while to identify exactly what it had feel like to be so panicked. He was in love with her. Ryder was in love with her. And he hadn't asked her to say it back. In fact, he had told her she didn't have to, which made it worse because she knew that he wanted something from her he wouldn't even ask for or demand. She asked for it once. She blinked, trying to calm her heart rate. Ryder was long gone, up and out of bed and working, and she was in the house alone, but it didn't do anything to help. She shuffled downstairs and found herself a bowl of fruit sitting on the table. That bowl of fruit that he made for her every morning. Just one of the many ways he had shown her that he did love her before ever even saying it. She didn't know why it was terrible, only that it was. She didn't know why it frightened her like this, only that it did. It didn't have to. It didn't. She could be with him, and it didn't have to be love. She could still protect herself. She couldn't eat the fruit because suddenly her stomach fell off. Went back to the caravan and just sat there for a while because she thought maybe being here would make her feel, she didn't know, safe, back in her role of what she used to, when she had been his friend who lived next door and not his wife who lived in the same house and was pregnant. Okay, she couldn't go back, and after a couple hours in the camper, she made that conclusion. She couldn't just hide away here and pretend that nothing was happening. That was impossible, and even she wasn't delusional enough to make her think that it was possible. None of it mattered. She just decided about that the same time she had all her jewelry making supplies laid out on the kitchen table. It didn't matter that anything was called, and they didn't need to get stuff like that. If he wanted to say that, he could, but in her experience, all those words didn't need to matter quite so much, and they could just continue on as they had been, bonded together in a really significant way that they didn't need words and labels for all that. Really, everything really could be fine, he said, and it could be, so it could be. And she wanted to find a way to take up that little hiccup that they had experienced and turn it into something more. Because she had been reluctant to make love since he said that, and he hadn't pushed it. He hadn't pushed her at all, which wasn't like him. He wasn't letting her sit back and stew. Normally he was a lot more. Well, exactly the way he'd been with with the midwife, encouraging her to make the meetings and sit there asking all the questions, forcing the conversation, but he hadn't been like that, not since he had told her that he loved her. Well, she didn't want that. She wanted him to be him, so she would have to be her. And with great purpose she stood up and began to put her jewelry, fixing it away. And when she went upstairs and found the sexiest white lingerie she had had, and she had quite a bit, she liked white, but Ryder seemed to very much like her in white, and even liked her even better out of it, and she intended to go ahead and tempt him. She tiptoed out of the house in her secret concealed beneath the gauzy white dress and began to go on a quest to find her husband. He was working outside the barn, sweat pouring off him, when his wife approached him. Things had been great that day following his revelation, not between them, he had thought, that it would be easy to throw the words out there and not ask for anything back, and he could see that no matter what she said about labels or words, that didn't change anything they had, because for the past few days Samantha had been running scared from him, avoiding his touch, avoiding his kiss, and he wasn't going to push, not here, not now. There had been a time when he would have, but not on this. He couldn't, because there would be no pushing him into the revelation either. He had a lot of theories about why it happened at the mustard seed diner over a hamburger, why the words had rolled off his soul like the first rumblings of thunder before a catastrophic storm, because love was like that, he supposed, that it could be there, growing inside you, and you wouldn't even know for all that time. At least, that was how it was for him. But Logan telling him that he was in love with Sammy hadn't made him understand the words for himself, and the first time that they were together, when he'd known that they were joined, changed the fabric of what they were forever, and hadn't spoken the words to him either. Wedding vows had not done it, because there was nothing on the outside that could ever make you see, not when you didn't want to see. It caught him in the moment. She had bitten into a French fry, the most incrucous and normalest thing he could think of. But every moment, every sight, every scent was more beautiful because of her. There wasn't a breath that he could take that wasn't infused of love in her. And the very simple truth was, it was deeply part of an entirety of all that he was, and all that they were, formed around it until all those things changed and happened. It had taken every last one of them. The boom boom, the pregnancy, the marriage, and fear. And in those spaces the words had finally found their purchase on his soul. And now they were imprinted there. He couldn't just unknow it, that he loved her more than he loved anything. He had known that he would kill for her, but now he knew he would die for her. He had known that he couldn't live without her, but now he knew that he would do whatever it took, change whatever he had to live with her, which is infinitely harder, sharper, and more brilliant fantasy than fear of loss could ever be. The joy and challenge of bending yourself and your life around someone else, finding the better and worse in the richer and the poorer. Yeah, realizing that he was in love with her changed nothing and everything and all at once. And now here she was, the breath in his lungs caught, and he held him as he braced himself for what might come next. She looked beautiful, the ray of light she always been, streaming into his life, warming him with her brilliance, lighting the path for him. Hi, he said. Weird how sometimes it was hard for him to find words to say to her. They never had that problem before, but now it was like what Wes said. The interactions between them suddenly felt heavier, the potential for pain much larger. Everything had a higher cost and a higher weight. I thought we might take a little walk, she said. Okay, he said, putting the pitchfork down immediately, because if she wanted his attention, he was going to give it. What's on your mind? He asked, as the two of them set down the path toward the river that flowed through the property. She didn't hold his hand. She wasn't looking at him. I just wanted to be with you. All right, he said, knowing that he sounded skeptical and cautious, feeling a bit skeptical and cautious. But he couldn't deny her and couldn't turn away from her. He would follow Samantha Marshall wherever she went as long as he lived. She had snarled him that day 17 years ago with a sugar cube in her outstretched hand and hope in her eyes, and he'd been a goner ever since. And he wasn't even sorry about it, not at all. They made it down to the thick, dense package of trees near the water and protected them from the harshest of the light of the sun. That was when she turned to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, pressed against him, and kissed him. The impact of this hit him like a sledgehammer. She hadn't touched him like this, not since he told her that he loved her. And he was just human enough to be consumed by it, even though he knew he should find out what was going on. Even though he knew there had to be more to this than she was letting on. He had to surrender to it because it was Sammy. There was no other choice. When they were together, he just couldn't much think. They pulled back for a moment, and that's when he looked into her eyes and saw that they were guarded, that she was trying to hide herself from him, and somehow she was pretending that she was opening up. Sammy, being outrageous yet again, trying to control what happened between them. Let go, he said, bringing his mouth to hers. Let go, Samantha. She said nothing. Instead, she squeezed her eyes shut and tight and kissed him again. She started to pull at his clothes and arched against him. Come on, I just need you. You need to let someone else be in charge, he said firmly, and don't you give me that I'm always in control. It's not true, Samantha. Stop it, she said. Only you can call me Samantha. I know, he said, and I'm the only one who ever will, because I'm your husband, I'm your best friend, and this is it for me. This is it for me, he repeated, and I want to take my time. Well, she said, still sounding petulant and bratty, if this is it for you, then we have forever. Exactly, he said, so what does time matter anyway? We can make forever this moment if we want. He looked at her, her beautiful, enticing, visible through the thin fabric she was wearing. She had some kind of witchcraft beneath her skirt, and he could barely see what it was, but he was dying to get the view. He lifted her up off the ground, and she protested for just a moment, then gave in as he carried them both down to the river. He set her down and just stood there, looking at him. Her face was beautiful, glowing as the sunlight filtered through the trees. Undeniable by design. Why are you hiding from me now? You're crazy, she said. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not. Maybe I just really want to know you. Maybe I never will. Not really. The idea filled him with despair, almost more than anything else, that he may never get down to the bottom of who she was, that he may never reach her heart. He wanted to know her every inch, inside and out. He wanted to know him in ways that he didn't even want to know himself. Something about the words seemed to penetrate, and she registered on fear on that beautiful face. Does that scare you, that I might not even know, he asked, that I might not be able to tell you? Nothing scares me, she said. I've been to hell and back. I grew up in a house where looking at someone in the wrong direction would mean physical repercussions. My own father put me in the hospital. Nothing scares me. But he did. He scared her. Not in the way, but he could see it and could sense it. And he had to wonder, even if more than him, more Sammy was scared of herself. He stripped the shirt off and cast it on the ground and was, "You're always after me to go skinny dipping. Might as well give this a try." He picked her up and carried her out over to the water. Fully clothed, he watched at the river, soaked through his shirt, giving him a tantalizing view of what was underneath. "I've never seen a more beautiful sight than you, Sammy Marshall. I've been looking at you for 17 years. The greatest gift over the past couple of months has been seeing you in your beauty in all different ways. It's been a miracle, being so familiar with you and seeing you for the first time, like a damn miracle." He kissed her, and they were a little bit more hands-on, which I'm not going to say because if the kids watch this channel, I don't want them to know what I'm saying, so read the book. And she was still perfect to him, even like this, frightened and sitting on a rock, reduced by fear. But he didn't want her to be afraid. He swam across into the space and climbed up beside her, taking to avoid the sharp rocks, given that he didn't have the protection of clothing, and she looked up at him. For a moment he saw all that unmasked fear in her eyes, confusion. He felt like he was staring at her like that night after he found her being beaten by her dad, when he had carried her out of the house and looked down at her then. His heart ached to think that he caused her any kind of pain, that somehow it echoed back to that. He wanted to catch up and protect her, and when she shivered again, that was exactly what he did. He swept them both off the rocks and carried her to a patch of grass and sat in the sun. This part of the ranch was generally unoccupied, as it took crossing the river or driving on the road that encircled the place to get back here, so he had no worries about being caught. There was nothing to do but simply lie on the sun with that sweet patch of grass. He looked over at her. He put his hands on her stomach where their child grew, and he kept on doing that until she was sobbing and her breath caught on a small noise. This woman had come into his life and burst all the grief, pain, and the darkness, and he wanted her to do it again. And it wasn't about her loving him back. He wanted more than anything to accept this. He wanted her to find her. He wanted to find her so that he could find herself. He wanted to be able to shine in her own light all the way down, to be healed by him in the way that he felt healed by her. And he said, "I love you," once again. And "Look at me," he whispered. And she obeyed. She obeyed because she could do nothing else. When those eyes met hers, and she felt them on him, of all the searing right down to her soul. And he was the steadiest, best man she'd ever known or ever could know, and all that he wanted something from her. And he would never, ever leave her. He was in this relationship for real, because that's who he was. Even if it made him miserable, even if he had said to her that he had to be romantic, because if it wasn't him, it wouldn't be anyone else, because he was marrying her and they were forever. And it was the same for him. He wouldn't have anyone else because she was his wife, and if they couldn't give him the words, then no one could. Or would, sorry. She would make him miserable for the rest of his life because she already had. She had a burst in a tangle of complication that a man like Ryder would never have found on his own, because he was far too good, far too organized, and the universe had dealt its blow to him already, the way it had treated him, taking his parents away, and that she was just heaped on chaos on top of it. And he was good. He took care of people. It was what he did. And he thought he was in love with her because that is who he was. He had married her, so now he thought he was in love with her, but he wasn't. And he would go on thinking that for as long as she was his wife, because of course he was a man who would endeavor to love his wife. Of course he was, because he was a good down to his soul. And she was a creature whose own father had been enraged by the sight of her, whose mother never once defended her. She had stitched herself into a quilt of this family, and they had opened their arms to be accepting of her, but she wasn't one of them. They were united by a common tragedy, and she simply covered herself in the protective layer that they had created for their own selves, and she was selfish. Selfish, needy, and she didn't think there would ever be an end to it. Someday she would look at him, and she would look at him, and she would ask herself if he ever really did love her. It brought to an edge of terror to her, because he thought he meant it, he truly did, but someday he would realize that he was in prison, a prison that he had chosen, but the one he had been locked in by his own good intentions, and she wouldn't be able to bear that. When he looked at her with disgust, too, she would never be able to weather that. And she knew that he would see all that, and the mess of terror, the mess of need, the endless well that could never be filled, that he saw the sad, the wounded creature, and that underneath it all, the girl who couldn't control anything, not at all, who was helpless, frightened, and sad. She hid all that, the girl, from everyone. She was so confident and sure, with all her smiles, her attitude, with the way she acted around him. She pretended that it was honest, the most honest, that she said whatever came into her mind. She pretended for him, for everyone, and most especially for herself. Now that she was the least able to hide, she just saw how much she did. Only when she had become aware of needing to conceal things from him did she realize that she'd been doing it all along. Because that girl, how could that girl take what he was offering? "Sammy," he said gruffly. She opened her eyes again, and he thrust as they're having a moment. And she found the center of herself, selfishly needy and small. She wanted to weep with it, because she had been so sure that she would find something glorious and brilliant in her revelation, and her seeking this new piece to who she was. But she didn't. Instead, she looked inside herself, and she found something contemptible. A woman who had attached herself to a man who had already been through enough. And she knew that it would be up to her to set them both free. But she pushed away from that now, and pushed to the side, because she knew only how this would feel, and he was with her, making her bright and brilliant, more than she could ever hope to be on her own. He lit her up with burning brilliance, and that was when she realized that he had always been her sun, her guiding light, the source of her life, and if she had given him anything, it was only because she was reflecting that light back on him. Sorry. "I have to go," she whispered, slipping away from him and peeling herself away from the wet grass. "Why?" he said. "I don't mean to the house. I mean I need to go away." "What are you talking about?" "It was my original plan to leave here, to go and find some adventure, to find myself. And you decided the time to revisit that plan would be after you became with baby and you married me." "I'm not revisiting. I'm remembering why. Why this was all important to me, and I've been dealing with all of this. Isn't going to work." "What do you mean this isn't going to work? We're together, and I'm in love with you. I made vows to you. Nothing says more than how well this could work than that. Because it's about me," she said. "I can't do this." As soon as the words tripped off her tongue, she felt them rebound against her. She tried to take a breath, but found that she couldn't. She didn't know how to articulate all the things that were rattling around inside her, and they made her feel too exposed anyway, so she decided to lean into what everyone else was thinking she was, to what he seemed to think she was sometimes. "I told you that I wanted to find myself, and I haven't yet." "BS," he said. "You don't mean that, so what is this really about?" He said, there's a little bit part that I'm not going to read here, because again the kids may be watching. But he had done this with her because of her, and he said that he loved her. Maybe he meant it, is what she's thinking. How would he know? He had every choice in life taken from him at such an early age, and he was so beautiful, and it reminded her of being 17 again and looking at him and aching like this, and she wanted so much to join his family, and watched over the fence and thought that they were everything that would be perfect if she would just be with them. But it was so much more complicated than that. Oh, how she wished it weren't. Oh, how she wished it could be simple again. "I don't want to be married," she said softly. "I told you that, but you push me, and backing off when it comes to the declaration of love and all that, and it doesn't erase the fact that you pushed me into this part, and it isn't what I want." His face had gone blank. His whole body was tense. "Go then. Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back." "That's not what I'm asking for." "And I said nothing would break us. I said that, and I meant it, and I still do. Nothing is going to break us, Sammy, not without our permission, your permission. I won't leave you. I won't forsake you. I've been here for you all this time, and I'll be here for you when you get back. No questions asked." "That's the problem," she said. Anger rioted through her. "That's the problem. You don't know what it's like to choose something because you want it, Ryder Daniels. The only thing you know how to do is martyr yourself to your responsibilities, and I won't be one more. So now you're going to tell me why I get to do things. What and how I feel?" "I know you," she said. "It's never just sugar cubes. It was never just the sugar cubes. You couldn't resist the pitiful girl who folded up in the corner of your barn, and you took me and you made me the best that you could, just like you did every other thing that's been thrown at you in your life, and I can't live in that forever, and you shouldn't either." "That's not it," he said. "I was a man, a boy, drowning in my own responsibilities, absolutely and completely dragged under the water with them, and you were my first glimpse of the sunlight all that time, Sammy Marshall, and when I saw you I saw salvation, and I reached my hand out, and you're right. It was never just the sugar cubes, it was you." He cupped her face. His eyes were searching into hers. "Your hand, your face, your eyes. I wanted you from that first moment I saw you, and I was willing to love you in the way that I could. And the way that you could take in, the way it could be for all time, but it's over now. The time for waiting, the time for holding back. I think that you believe that. I really do. But I don't think it's true. I think there's more at play here than that, and it's not the life I want." She sucked in a sharp breath, and she prepared to do one thing that she had never done to him before. "Why?" "I never wanted love. I didn't ask for it. Don't keep me caged. You know that I can't just stand that." He nodded once. "Sure, but I need to know something else. I'm not your father, and if you look at me and ask me for love, you won't get my fist. You'll just get my heart." "What a man." "I know that. Don't you think I know that? It doesn't make this any easier, but I won't live a life that I don't want. I was born into one, and I'll never stay in one. Our child deserves more than that." Those last words burned, because she was lying, and using the baby along with it. He might not thank her now, but he might not hate her now. And he would only hate her later. And that would be the most durable. The cost of waiting for the punch, and not to her face, but to her soul. That was the one thing she couldn't fathom. To take away all the protective layers and to destroy that later, when her walls were down, by the one person that she wanted to trust, and she wanted more than anything. "I think that you'll understand," she said. "I'm protecting us." "I've walked away from you a number of times," he said. "The first time that I tasted you in the camper, after the first time we were together, I let you walk away. I didn't say anything, and I'm not going to walk away now. I'm not going to let you walk away without hearing this. You're running scared, baby. I know you. Nobody else knows you the way I do, and I can see it. And that's why you're running, because you're scared of something. You let me rescue you once. You let me fight for you. Let me fight for you now, and trust me. You're right, you did rescue me, and you've done it a hell of a lot more than once. I can't rely on you to do it forever. I have to go figure out how to rescue myself, otherwise, if I lose you, I'll be left with nothing, and I'll be nothing more than a sad, spineless... I'll be my mother, and I can't for our baby. I just can't. And what about me? Where do I fit in? Because I'm not going to be a favorite uncle here, Sammy. I'm the father, and I will be a father." His eyes were hard, blazing with emotion, and she just couldn't bear to look at him. "No, of course not. I'm never going to keep the baby from you, Ryder, but that's not us. I can't do us." And so she did walk away, and she had to swim across the damn river, crawl out naked, shivering and disgraced, rather than feeling cherished and sensual as he had done when she had been carried into the river. She gathered her clothes, got dressed, and he was still standing there watching her, true to his word. He wasn't gone. True to his word he remained. So damn loyal. So damn fearless. Not her. She was a coward. But she couldn't face the alternative, so the cowardice it was. But she went back to the camper and looked around at the tiny place she had not called home now for over a week. But she knew it was more than cowardice. Whatever she was doing that required her that she leave her heart behind. But she was afraid of it because it hurt, because it was shattered. But if she left it behind, maybe she could keep on breathing. Oh, I'm going to leave you with that tonight. I know. They just got married and now we're having heartbreak already. But love is not a guaranteed smooth ride. We have ups and downs. It's like a roller coaster, right? And just because they're having a moment does not mean that they're not going to work it out, because there's still some book left to go. But this is when I was reading this book, and when she was running from her fears and her insecurities, and she didn't know how to make it all work. And I think in life we all have that moment where it's so perfect and we're so scared and we don't know how to make it all work. So we put our defenses up and we run, because we know that if we run away and don't face them, then we're not going to have whatever we could have. That was such an emotional, moving part for me. Anyway, I'll do more of that book with you tomorrow. And I don't know why the camera all of a sudden is deciding to cut in and cut out. But it is, amazingly enough. And yeah, I'm crying again. It's part of my life. Anyway, I've got to go get a workout in. I work tomorrow. I want the best for each and every one of you. And I pray that maybe I can come back here tomorrow and maybe we'll have a working camera day. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I love each and every one of you. Thank you for tuning in. God bless. I wish you nothing but the best. Now we can be 3 feet apart instead of 6. Make sure you're washing your hands, and when you can't, use your hand sanitizer. And I know that some of you are saying, I've had the shot, I don't need to wear my mask, because that's what my grandpa says. But for those of us who have polycystic ovarian syndrome and have not had the shot yet, please wear your mask. Think of others. Put others before yourself. And remember, it's better to give than it is to receive. I wish the absolute best for you. Faith, hope, and love. And much prosperity in your heart and in your bank account. And as always, stay safe, stay well. And I hope to see you again tomorrow. God bless.